usually be in like 2 a.m. my time. But yeah, man, early. Um, Kids went to sleep early, so cool. I don't never get to do this, so this is pretty cool. Well, anyway, I don't know. Like maybe I need to have an intro to these videos, but I've just gotten used to just kind of winging it. Maybe I'll get like a little format going these days. But till then, this is just another live at night. Um, we talked about a lot yesterday. We talked about a lot day before yesterday, and yeah, it's been pretty cool. It's been pretty cool going live and hearing what people thoughts are about like the subjects and all that good stuff. But yeah, um, we've been talking a lot about like self awareness, mental health, that type of stuff, and something that we left off on was like how how to determine if a person is a good person, like even if that person is like taken advantage of. So I know we left off on a conversation of being a good person versus enabling someone with like bad intentions, right? Um, I don't know. I just felt like for the conversation to go from like self awareness to I don't know, like relationships with other people. I thought that was really interesting. And I also learned that when you're thinking about yourself, it's very easy for you to get, I want to say tunnel vision, to the point where you're only thinking about your perspective, and not the perspective of others. So I thought that was pretty cool. But as for tonight, like, I don't know. I usually just kind of let the live just kind of do what it does. Um, and, depending on what somebody's idea might be, just kind of throwing it out there. Um, a lot of times I start these lives and I be thinking it's going to go one way and then it ends up going a completely different way. Um, but yeah, like today was a chill day. Um, I usually go out and I work out and all that good stuff. And there's this route. Shout out to Isaac the Goat. There's this route that I usually like, walk on, and I learned that I logged at least 2 miles a day, which I thought that was pretty cool. That the kids would, hang out with me for like 2 miles. That's a big deal. Um, uh, oh man, Dominican. I don't want to like butcher your name, but shout out to you too. And I'm a little bit out of my element tonight. I ain't gonna lie, because usually I'll be on like in the middle of the night. And so I usually get a lot of people from like overseas because it's daytime where they are. And then occasionally I get like, some people who are just up at the late night, probably working night shift. But I've been trying to work on, um, I don't know, starting lives a little earlier. I haven't really figured out what format I wanted to take yet because, channel is still fairly new. Um, but yeah, so I don't know, just kind of checking in. Also getting used to this new mic. I think I might just get me a mic that's like more stable. This mic, I don't know if any of you guys, one of them clip-on mics or whatever, if any of you guys are content creators as well, but it's a nuisance. I feel like this is more for like interviews. But it came with like a free package. So I was like, okay, whatever, I'll take that on top of that. But yeah, man, I mean, just for the most part, I'm just chilling. Um, and I get these lives in when I can, mainly because I got my two little ones, and they usually wilding out to about. They'll go to sleep at like, let's say 8, 9 o'clock, somewhere in there. They usually go to bed at a decent hour, and then they'll get up, and then they'll just be up for a while. Well, not they. Let me stop putting it on both of them. So I have my son and my daughter, and my daughter, she usually gets up. She just be up the whole time. So yeah, I just thought that it was really interesting last night. Like it was kind of a part two of the night before, because we were like talking about like self awareness, and it helped me learn that even though I have a certain way of thinking that other people don't think the same way, which you would think it would be like duh, like everybody don't think like you. But I just thought my way of how I interpret the way that I interact with other people, I was like, that's like the perfect formula. Like, why wouldn't anybody else think that way? Right. And so we started getting to this conversation of what makes a person a good person. And that's something that I've been thinking about, like, even when I was working out today, and it was like, there are a lot of people that can perceive you to be one way when your intention is to come off another, right? So we kind of talked about, like, if you're a good person who helps people, does that make you a bad person if you help a person who constantly takes advantage of you? So, like, let's say, like, we all got a family member that always need to hold $20. And it gets to a point where it's like, are you a bad person for the one time that you tell them that they can't hold $20, right? Especially if you know their situation and they need help or whatever. And then it's like, when does it get from the point of helping somebody that needs the money, you got plenty of it, to you're enabling a person, right? So I don't know. It made me just kind of think about that, because I'm a very stern person. Um, I guess how I don't want to get too much into like money habits, but I'm the type of person that I kind of have a numbers rule. So first of all, before I call myself helping anybody, I make sure that whatever the situation is that a person is dealing with, if they need help, I assess myself, like, is this a situation I want to help a person with? Like, going back to the scenario of letting somebody hold some money, right? There are plenty of people who will go and spend up all their money and then turn around and be like, oh, yeah, but I need help with this financial thing over here, right? So, a lot of times, nice people and good people, you can always go to them. And especially if they know what it's like to need something, and they'll help. They won't think twice about it. But it gets bad when you keep helping a person. Like, the obvious part is when you're dealing with somebody who clearly goes, I can always just go and ask Jess for this or whatever. She's gonna always give it. Everybody can think about that person and say that that person is doing something wrong. But on the flip side, what got my wheels turning last night with the live last night with the chat room was, is there a possibility that the person who intend to help, that person is not that person is not a good person? Like, their intentions are good, but the end result of what they're doing is bad. So, we kind of leaned on that a little bit. And of course, we got the kids or whatever. So my daughter was waking up. I had to cut it short. I ain't gonna lie to y'all. Sometimes I do get sleepy during these lives because, I'm chasing two toddlers throughout the day, right? But I just kind of wanted to express my views on this, especially while I have the time. And I feel like the bad person that nobody talks about is the person who intends to do things well, or the person who intends to do something good. So it's like, what's worse? Is it the person who takes advantage of the person that's continuously giving back? Or is it the person that continuously gives to people? And the way that I feel about the whole situation is that for the person who, obviously, the person who constantly take advantage of the person who's giving, everybody can look at that person and be like, that person's wrong. Not a question, not a debate. But the person that's always enabling, I feel like that's something that should be discussed because a lot of times when people have good intentions, they only want people to think about what they intended to do instead of the end result of what actually happened, right? So that's something that I know that's like an unpopular concept to bring up, but even when I talked about like how my mom, she was a very giving person like that. And what I've realized with people like that is that I don't know if they're looking for like reciprocity. I don't know if they're looking for somebody to pour back into them. Well, you know what? Let me stop saying I don't know because I do know. You got you got the classic person that's always poured into everybody, and they usually use religion to justify the outcomes. So a lot of times they'll be like, oh, it doesn't matter if that person never pays me back, and then they do this whole "to God be the glory" spill, right? But then at the same time, when you're looking at the end result of what's being done, it's like, is that God? You know what I mean? I'll give an even better example. I've seen situations where people have like a family member who's addicted to drugs, right? And this person who's addicted to drugs always come around needing help, always come around asking for stuff. And I understand that people who do have drug problems, it's a very touchy subject. It affects everybody. I've yet to meet anybody that doesn't know anyone who struggled with drug addiction, right? But that person that's always trying to help drug addicts, knowing that that drug addict is not trying to get well, in that situation, is the person who's always giving money to the drug addict a good person, right? And this is how I think about it. I don't think about the intentions of a person as much as I think of the end result. So, like, let's go back to the example of lending money to somebody who has a drug problem. It may not be the intention of the lender to support a drug habit. It may not be that intention. However, if they hand this person the money, that's what they're paying for. That's what your money is going to. Like, it's easy to do things wrong and it's easy to be bad at something, you know. Um, but the thing about being good is that it's not enough just to be good. You have to maintain doing things well. So I think the other side of being a good person is being mindful of how you're affecting others. A lot of times when people do things well, I don't think that they process how they're being perceived. So, like yesterday, we talked in length about self awareness, right? And I guess I'm gonna just keep leading on this example. Let's say if I have a friend who, let's take the same scenario. If I have a friend who has let's get away from drugs. I feel like drugs is a little more hardcore. Alcoholism, that's a little more, at least that's legal. A person who has a drinking problem, if I know they're gonna go to the liquor store, or I know if they're gonna hang out in a bar, that's where they always are. That's where they always end up. I'm gonna give you $50. Like, if I give you $50 and you drink yourself into oblivion, then at the end of the day, I enabled the behavior. Now, if I didn't know, but then see, that's this is where it gets sticky too, because again, if I did not have good intentions, right? If I didn't care, I hand the person the money, think nothing of it, right? Cool. Now, if I intend to do things well, then I have to be accountable for my own actions. And I think that's why it's such a challenge to do things well, because even if you intend on doing a good thing, what people do, what you've chosen to do to help people, you can't control that, right? But at the same time, you may have what you think, but how you're received can be different. So, like, even with yesterday when I was talking to everybody, I was like, yeah, the way that you know who you are, you got to trace your parents. And everybody was like, nah. Like, which threw me off because I was like, I never knew that people in mass, they go, if I want to get to know myself, I'm going to do things my way or something like that, right? And that also made me think about, I guess, how much of a dinosaur I am, because the way that I think of things is based off of the people around me and based off of like my community. And I'm starting to learn in this day and age that community, people, and connections, it's not what it used to be. So everything is like virtual. And that's a whole other element. Like these days, people can't even connect unless they're using the internet or unless they're using like a phone. That's new to me. So that also affects how a person is perceived because you can be trying to do things right, but if most people, I'll give another example. I remember when it was a trend that if a man pays for a woman's meal, let's say they out on a date, man pays for a woman's meal, that was seen as he's being controlling, like automatically. I think it was some trend on like, Love and Hip Hop or like Real Housewives of Atlanta or something. It's like this episode. Everybody was just following the trends or whatever. And, me and my family, we were just out, just having a good time. And when the waitress came to take the bill, naturally my husband went to go pick up the bill. And the waitress was like, "Hey, are you sure? Are you okay with him taking the bill?" And I'm like, "What do you mean?" Because I did not know that the perception was if somebody is trying to pay for your food, that they're being like controlling or they're being like, I'm going to pay for your stuff because later on, I'm going to cash in on the fact that I cashed out. Right? So I didn't even know that that was a thing. And I mean, this internet stuff, man, it is quick, and I'm still, my algorithm is just, it's so not giving. I hate to say giving, but it's not, it's not keeping me connected. So it's like the type of things that I look at and I think about, I'm having a real difficult time interacting with like, I don't know, like people around me because it's like I can't keep up with the trends. I'm not gonna say I can't. It's a bad word to use. Having a hard time keeping up with the trends. So like even when I talked about this whole going out to dinner, like I just felt like, we're just going to go get something to eat. We're a family structure. It's four of us. We go and get something to eat, no problem. You know, and for the waitress at the time to be like, he doesn't, you don't have to, let him pay for your food if you don't want to. And I'm like, what? Like, it's like, that's what you're supposed to do. But then I'm also learning that I guess traditionalism is also becoming like under attack or whatever. Like the way that people think about like the family structure and all that, that's becoming less and less popular. So now it's like, okay, going back to the whole self-awareness and then what it's like to be a good person. What does it mean to be a good person? Because even in the situation with like the restaurant, it was like, oh, you're being forced to have a free meal. And I just thought that was crazy. And you know what? It was before we had our second child. So it was just me, my husband, and my son, and it was like it's no big deal. Like why is this like a thing? Um, because instantly he was demonized. Instantly, my husband was like the bad guy. I never thought I would see the day where a man is seen as controlling because he's like, hand me the check. Which is weird too. It's like we're in this time period where I don't know if men, I don't know what men are. I don't know what men are these days. I'm not really sure on what their role is. I don't even think that men have a role these days. Um, like, I just feel like everybody is just working, trying to pay the bills, and that's it. I don't think there's a such thing as a norm. Um, I just think everything is just everything. And you just got to live your life the way you're going to live it. But here's the issue that I have with that. Before having kids, I did not care. None of that mattered to me because I was like, yeah, after I'm gone, this is it. Whatever. It was just me, my husband, our truck. We were making money. We were building our business. And that was simple. One of the main reasons why I built this YouTube channel, I'm starting this YouTube channel, is because I'm trying to get the temperature of what people are doing now, how people are thinking now. I didn't really care about the social attitudes. And it goes back to the original conversation from 2 days ago of being self aware and realizing how I'm coming off to people. Like, I hear a lot of, high profile content creators and stuff that talk about um, being themselves and everyone around them will adjust, right? And ultimately, yeah, I mean, that's a part of my personality. But then at the same time, I'm thinking differently because there are children involved. um, like, our kids are not just kids. Like, I don't know if I'm tripping, but these days, co-parenting is like the norm, and it becomes even more of a slippery slope when you throw in demographic, right? So it's like, I don't know why I thought, and I've had this grievance more than once. Somehow, you know what? Let me back up. I'm gonna say it, but then I'm gonna explain it. I was thinking somehow my husband and I, we will get married, and then everything will just fall into place. And especially, he had a lot of married friends, so at that time I was like, well, duh. He was oftentimes the bachelor in a group. So I just thought that we would just mesh, right? And then that's when we learned on his side of the fence, like, being married is not a monolith. I hate to use that word. Like, all marriages are not created equal. All marriages are not the same. People marry for very different reasons. People have very different attitudes towards marriage. And because of that, they have very different lifestyles and different purposes. Like, I didn't realize how complicated people were um, until, I want to say until I got married, really. And then it was like one of those things where it wasn't a big deal that people were so different because I felt like in a marriage, it's between me and my husband. So that's easy. Like, regardless of how other people around us interact with us, at the end of the day, our marriage is ours. It's just me and him. So it was very easy for me to still continue to think in a very, I don't want to say linear fashion, but a very limited fashion, like a very self serving fashion. Because before having kids, everything was about us all the time. There was nothing else. And it was so easy. You know, he didn't have any children, I didn't have any children. So, you know, we might wake up one day and say, hey, you know, let's go to Vermont. Like, hey, let's go to California. Like, hey, let's go hang out in Wyoming. Like, that was like all we were doing, you know. So it was like cool. And that's one thing I love about being in the United States too. It's a huge country. 48 states, you can just go anywhere. Like the United States, I'm a huge patriot. I love this country. So things got different when we had our son. And we would see in the news how, like, the whole LGBTQ doctrine was affecting families. And I remember when we first had our son, and there was the wristband they were going to put on our newborn, and they were asking us what gender did we prefer to put on our son. And, you know, emphatically, we were like, he's a boy, you know. And some of the nurses and stuff were like, the medical staff, they were like offended that we, you know, just didn't have any kind of reservation about saying he's a boy. And then they fought us about the circumcision. And that's when it just kind of clicked. And our son was born in 2022. So that's when it really clicked for Josh and I that we live in a very different world than what we used to. And in realizing that, we started seeing that we had to change the way that we approach everything and everyone. And then, you know, that was with a boy, having a boy. Having a girl, completely different thing. Um, we became more stringent. We became like less tolerant of things. I don't know why, but like having a daughter makes you. I think having a daughter makes you like more intense. Like with our son, it was like I guess because our son he's more. I don't want to use the word rambunctious, but he holds his own. Like you know, I mean, literally, the day after he was born, there was a doctor that was talking crazy, which I didn't know it was normal for doctors to be like, oh, you know, statistically speaking, your child is more likely to have a disability, and this and that is wrong with your child. And that this doctor got too close to Junior, and it was so crazy because he was trying to say that there's no way that my son can see him. And I was like, yeah, he's nose tracking you. Like, as you're walking through the room, he's like tracking you. Like, he's looking at you. And this doctor kneeled down and got in the face of my son. My son hit him twice. Now, mind you, this kid is just a day old, but I don't know why his motor skills, he just hit the dude like 2 times in the face. He had 2 red marks on his face. And I don't know, I guess it just made me feel like he's got it. You know what I mean? Like, I hear oftentimes people talk about how boys get away with a whole lot more than girls do. And, you know, it's a little bit of favoritism there, but it's also just the way that boys handle themselves. They're very aware. I'll give an example of that. Like, I noticed with my son when he was a little baby, we have like the master bathroom, and there's this giant mirror in the master bathroom. And there would be all this stuff. Like I said, as you can imagine, a master, you got all this counter space, you got double sinks, whatever. I just made that sound like we were ultra rich. We're not ultra rich, it's just a cardboard house. Anyway, I wouldn't say cardboard, jeez. Anyway, big bathroom, little bathroom. So out of all the things that he could have absorbed in looking at the space that he was in, he was only concerned with his reflection. I don't care what's on that counter. I don't care what's going on with the sinks. If I turn the sink on, he didn't really respond to that. He was just looking at himself and like making sure, like, he would look at himself and then he would look at me and then he would look at anybody else who was in the house after that, right? Whether it be like the maintenance man or whatever, his dad, whatever. And I noticed that he go from self to who's closest to proximity to me to everybody around us. That was just his thing. My daughter, on the other hand, take her into the same room and she's looking at everything in the room. And I was really trying to train her to, like, hey, watch yourself, look at yourself, be aware of yourself. And she didn't really start picking up on self until, I don't want to put a number on it, but I noticed, I'll just say, I noticed she was more concerned about her environment rather than herself. And that's something that I learned the difference between boys and girls. Um, because I don't care what's going on around my son. Like, he's just like, I'm in this environment. Like, and that's his mentality. Like, I am here right now. My daughter, on the other hand, it's like, as long as everything can appeal to her, like, it's all about appeal. And, I would hear people in social media spaces talk about how you got to buy a girl this and you got to do this and, to keep a woman's attention and things. And I honestly thought that that was like a learned behavior. But then just seeing, my son and my daughter, it's like just looking at the differences in how they behave, and it's directly attached to who they are as, male and female. It's been mind blowing. And also acknowledging the new world that we're in. Like, now this world is ran by algorithms, right? Like, I am confident that in about 50 years, what I'm doing right now is going to be like, I wouldn't say like an entry level job, but it's going to be like a mandate for everyday life. Like, this is, for me, this is like a hobby, but I've heard of people trying to get into college or trying to get a job, and they ask about that person's social media. They want to know if they have a channel, or they want to know that person's Instagram and stuff like that. It's like, this is going to be like the new thing. There are a lot of people who are literally making, hey mama, creating a lifestyle based off of content creation. Um, and if you really think about it, it feels like being a content creator, I feel like, is kind of an elitist, like an elitist profession. Like, there's been some regular, common, everyday people who picked this up and stopped doing it. And as I can imagine, it may become more and more demanding over time. But I'm starting to realize that, like, for example, the algorithm is more reliable than people. Um, it's like people are programmed by the algorithm. Like, technology is not here to accommodate us. We are looking for technology to give us steps on who to be and how to be now. Hmm. So in thinking about, like, say, like, in old times, there would be people that there will be milestones in life. Like, okay, the standard milestone: you go to school, you graduate, you get a job, you meet somebody, you get married, you have kids. That is not life anymore. Even with raising your children, that's it's not that anymore. Like, it's not it's not a duh. There's no there's no standard anymore. So, like I think people are now being reduced to or maybe people are evolving. It's easy for me to think of it as a reduction because I'm so comfortable where I am, and it's easy to be comfortable when you only know one thing. But morality is starting to change. Even um, the way that we view celebrities. Like I don't even think of celebrities as celebrities anymore. I don't. I think they are like the dinosaurs of entertainment. I think in time there will be no Hollywood, um, because anybody can get on camera and anybody can get a following and things like that. Anybody can have a platform. They can create a brand, a name for themselves. It used to be a time where you have to go through a label, you'll have to get your things copywritten, published, things like that. There was, I think, privacy. I think privacy is going to become an extinct concept. In fact, here in the United States, I don't think there even is any privacy, to be honest, at this point. Like, if you don't have a cell phone and if you don't have a social media presence, you're not really functional in society. Can I say that? I think that's extreme, but I'm saying generally speaking, most people can't function without a cell phone. Um, unless you off the radar like me. Technically, I'm not off the radar, but hmm. I'm just taking everything in like I'm learning. It's such a new thing because I really thought like I grew up in the '90s, and I thought as the years go forward, as technology advances, people will become more improved. What I'm finding is as technology advances, people are becoming less and less of themselves and more of what technology influences. So, like, since our lives are easier, we're lazier. Um, since we have the ability to communicate, we're less connected. And it's like, how do you, a person like me that grew up in the middle, like, sometimes I get envious of people who are old enough to remember a simpler time, and they'll be out of here by the time things get complicated. And then other people who they're used to the more complicated time. They're used to the technology, the social media platforms. Like, the idea of not having a cell phone is like crazy to the younger generation. Not having internet. Those of us who are like in the middle, those of us who were like born in the like '80s and the '90s, you know, and I think I know what my dilemma is too. I have a lot of influences from my great grandparents on both sides of the family. Both my parents were, I won't say mostly raised. I'm gonna say this: my mom was mostly raised by her grandmother, and my father was partially raised by his grandparents. And I think that's my issue here is that in their time, I'm thinking a lot about what was the norm by the time, like, so I'm thinking like the generation above me. Like, it's like my mom got to grow up with the same people who grew up with her parents, my dad the same, right? And so instead of them growing up with their generations, like people from the 60s, they were growing up with people from like the 19 teens and the 1920s. And then now you got me, and I'm just like, oof. Because that puts my parents, if they're still thinking like the 19 teens and 20s, I'm being raised by those influences. And so now I would say they were functioning as if they were in the 40s and 50s, which kind of puts me in the like 70s and 80s if you want to play about it. The average generation is 20 years or whatever. So that's just my thought on that. Like, I'm starting to understand individualism, and I'm starting to understand technology, and I'm starting to understand the media a little better. Um, I feel like I'm in such a unique situation, and I want to say this too. In America, there's Black culture, which I just feel like it's commercial culture. It's completely manufactured. And the reason why I say this is because other cultures are tied to a land, a people, a language, a history. And oftentimes, Black people in this country, we reinvent who we are and things like that, or we have different categories. In a certain time period, you're African American, certain time period, you're Negro, certain time period. It's always a different thing, right? And so, because of that, it's kind of like this dilemma. There's like when I think about how Black culture is advertised, I'm seeing how I'm disconnected from that. So like instability is like the norm. Um, I'm not gonna say lack of traditionalism because I think that's more of a liberal concept rather than a people concept, like more of an ideology. But I kind of I kind of hit a rough patch when I got married because instantly I could not identify with my friends and my colleagues, and people who often share my reflection. And it was like every time I did something, it's like in the Black community, we're taught to do things well and we're told to do things well. And then when we do things well, it's like we're an outlier or, perfect example. Like I remember like a lot of my friends and some of my close family members, my husband and I, we were dating for like a year and a half. We didn't have any kids. And they were going on like, when are you guys gonna have kids? And we were like, hey, we want to wait until we get married before we have kids because like it was like like everybody, that's the goal, right? You get married, then you have children. And it was like we were like shunned for that. Like we became like the weirdos because everybody around us had kids already, and in many cases, couples who had kids, they split up. So it was like, I don't know. I was like, we wanted to make sure that we had our stuff together before we even thought about kids. And like I said, that was seen as weird, which I thought was crazy because it's like, that the point? Isn't this what we are supposed to do? Like, and I'm not saying that we got married because we were supposed to, but anything outside of that, you hear people constantly saying that they wish they would have done things the right way, right? So then when you see somebody that's actually going about it the right way, then why do people feel like something is wrong with the person that's, trying to go in the right direction? And it's not to say that, well, I'm not even going to get into that because I can't even speak from that point of view. I don't have the experience. Well, anyway, when we got married, it was like the other couples around us who had kids and weren't married, instantly there was tension. And it was like we were disrupting everybody around us. Like it got to the point where me and Josh got so uncomfortable with hanging out with other couples because it'll be like, we got 3 kids, we got 4 kids, why are we not married? And it was like, I thought we were just gonna go out to dinner, I thought we were gonna go out to lunch or whatever, no big deal. But now it came from us double dating or us going to family functions and stuff like that. And everybody's cool, but now the elephant in the room is we're married and we don't have kids. And then it started to become, well, you guys' marriage isn't real because you don't have kids. And so it was like, for a while, that was a comfort for a lot of people. And I'm not gonna lie, I got comfortable. I started becoming a little complacent with it. I was like, yeah, this is good. At least, and I'm not one of those type of people that's like, oh, I'm married. Oh, I'm married. I'm not like that. It's just like it would just kind of come up. But I will say this though. Overnight after being married, the relationship changed instantly because I think we could feel the weight of being bound legally. Like you have to do paperwork if you want to walk away, right? So it's not like, everybody else's situation. And then you're constantly thinking about the fact that you always have someone to answer to. So that's a whole other dynamic. You can't just do whatever you want to do whenever you want to do it. And I mean, even like, doing your taxes, like, you know, you gotta financially, you gotta be in each other's business, and you gotta really work together. I think so many people are into the dream wedding, the white dress, the ceremony, but the work that comes out after it. Like, I understand the divorce rate. My husband and I, we've had our chats about divorce because we're like, yo, this is a lot of pressure, you know. Um, especially when it comes to like our finances, we're like, dang, like it was so many things that we just jumped feet first into. But then at the same time, having the pressures of other people and the type of feedback we were getting from people, it was like now all of a sudden we're the black sheeps because we decided to get the paperwork done. It costs less than $100, and you know we're like, yeah, like we're not getting any younger. We wanted to have kids. So it was like that for me, it just felt like if you already know who you want to have kids with, why not just tie the knot, just get it done. And of course there was a love aspect and stuff, but I speak more from I'm more of a practical person. Um, my husband, he's more of the romantic, he's more of the emotion, and we've always had that gut balance, right? And I think about that all the time. I'm like, okay, there were couples who were together longer than us who had more kids than us and all this other stuff. Well, we didn't have any, so anybody had more kids than us. And I just thought that, with this whole notion of like black love and black community and solidarity, buying a block and all this other stuff, generational wealth, all these buzzwords, I'm thinking we know what it's like to struggle. We know what it's like to go without. We know what it's like to need. So we're not going to create that environment for the next generation. But I wonder all the time, where is the disconnect? Because it was so simple for me and Josh, but it wasn't that simple for like our circle. And then when we talk about people outside of our circles, just passersby, strangers, people outside of the family, people like to come at us with statistics a lot. At the time that we got married, it was a pandemic was just starting to, lift up a little bit. There was all this craze on the internet with like red pill doctrine and gender war, and everybody's always talking about how black women. Oh my God, Dr. Umar Johnson was killing me. Dr. Umar was going off about how why got black queens married and all this. And mind you, I've always kept my head down. Me and Josh, we've just worked. And I mean, we used to love to spend money all the time. So we spent the majority of our time working, traveling, spending money because that's all you do when it's just you and the person that you're in a relationship with. And then when we were married, that's all we did was we just partied all the time, basically. Um, we never paid attention to anything because we were so busy just out enjoying life. But when we were preparing for our son, we was like, okay, that's when it really that's when it really just kind of clicked that we need to pay attention to what's happening socially because we were like, dang, we don't know any married couples. Like when I say married couples, this is what I mean. We know people who got married for money, or got married because they needed somebody to help them raise their kid. There's always a circumstantial thing. Immigration. We know some people who got married just for you know legal status in the U.S. That you know. But as far as people being married and actually working through, I mean, we know plenty of couples who are married and they live separately. You know, they're like married on paper, but they're not together. So oftentimes when we would have issues and we would go to these people that married for different reasons, it'd be like, well, hey, you don't have to go file the paperwork. Just move on. Just, just meet somebody new. And it was like, yeah, but we still, we still are tied. And then it became a brand new dynamic when we had our son. And it was like, yo, like now it's real because when we bump heads, there's a little person in the middle of this, and we had nobody to talk to. So it was like we were always figuring it out. And we were always, I mean, we would read that Bible letter for letter because that was like the only advice, um, the only sound advice anyway. And that's when we just started realizing like we are in I want to use the word conundrum. Like we're in a situation that we were not prepared for at all. Like this is what I literally thought. I know so many single mothers who are with their baby daddies. So many. And I would hear a lot of times, we're gonna get married when we get our first house. We're gonna get married when I get a better job. Or there's always we're gonna get married when fill in the blank. Because marriage is expensive. That's usually the narrative, right? So when me and Josh got married, like originally we were gonna have this big ceremony. Pandemic killed all that, right? And we were just like, okay, we'd hate to put more money towards a wedding only because we didn't know what the end was gonna be with this pandemic. We didn't know it was gonna abruptly stop the way it did. But we were like, we don't want to keep pouring resources, time, and energy into something and it might get canceled again. So we were just like, okay, just go to the courthouse and then have the ceremony another time. And boy, man, people like the vaccine mandates, all this other stuff. It was just everything was just going crazy with the internet. Everything was going crazy with real life. Like I remember we would go to the grocery stores and it's like security was at the door to tell us we couldn't come in unless we put our mask on. And I know that might be the norm for most people, but me and Josh, we were truck drivers. We were on the road. So it was like we weren't really stationary or sitting in one place to where we got to deal with people socially during that time, right? So all of this was like a weird experience for us. And I think there's a lot of trauma that came with the pandemic. In so many ways, we're so socially out of touch. And you would think that the more that we do to tie ourselves to normalcy, and I hate if I'm saying that too loosely, I'm kind of an apologist. I'm sorry if I'm dragging that out. But it's like you would think that you do everything right, that you would end up around the right people. And everybody knows right from wrong. So why wouldn't anybody do the right thing? But it's like the idea today is what exactly is right? You know what I mean? Like some people have the belief that marriage is not for them. Some people can go their entire life and be totally fine being single. And there are so many advantages to being single. Jeez. Um, but at the same time, it's like for me in my situation, being single just didn't work for me. And, you know, I found somebody it didn't work for him either. And it was like, it's good to have your papers. um, and especially in considering having kids is it's just easier. Um, and there's a lot of people who talk about they want to be married. It's a very easy thing to envy when you haven't experienced it. And when you do experience it, marriage, of course, is it's a well, I can use the word to say it's an institution, but it's one of those things that you have to want to do. I think people look at the romance of it and they think about the commitment of it, but they don't think about the I want to say the humanism or the humanistic form of it. It's been so hijacked and commercialized and remixed and revamped. It's a very cognitive thing. It's a very conscious thing. Um, like I hear people on the internet talk about what kind of husband they want, what kind of wife they want, and it's like it's so what's the word? It's so demanding of the individual. Is there's so much self-evaluating. Um, it forces you to look at yourself a lot, to observe yourself a lot, and it also forces you to make decisions that affect others around you constantly. That vow of forsaking all others, people don't understand how deep that vow is. I think that whole forsaking all others is one of the heaviest parts of being married because when you don't do it, you forsake your spouse and you break in a vow. Like it's so easy to break that vow. And it really gets put to the test when you have kids because as a parent, you're constantly pouring into your child. And if you're lucky, you're married to someone who also pours into the child. And sometimes you kind of you kind of stretch yourself thin. There's always a time when you're going to be tired. You're going to be a little more tired, but you still got to keep pouring. And then at the same time, you still got to maintain your vows, no matter how challenging your days are. Sometimes it's not just days. Sometimes it's months. Sometimes it's years that you just. It's like a. It's. I won't say it's like a job, but it's really difficult to explain. But it's so demanding, and the. I would say the number one thing is whatever you think you know, you learn real fast that you are figuring it out. Like you're figuring it out. The person that you're with is figuring it out. And sometimes you can trick each other because sometimes you would think just because you're married that you think the same or you feel the same about something because you love the other person so much, only to find out that person is on a completely different planet. And again, when you have kids, the dynamic changes. Like, the thing about kids is that they kind of invite the world into your house because um, they have to go out in the world and they have to figure out who they are, what their life is going to be about. And, from the time that you conceive a child, it's like the world already has an opinion about children and it starts to infringe immediately. Like it infringes on the child, him or herself. Like the fact that we got into this whole kerfuffle about whether or not our son should be documented as a boy, I thought that was crazy. Like, I mean, you know what I really thought? Like, we here in the South, we're in North Carolina. I was thinking, we not in California, and I think I actually verbally said that in the delivery room when they were gonna put the band on my son, and they were like, what gender should we put on the band? Or they were gonna put him as unidentified for like the gender part of the band. And I was like, no, it's identified as right there. Like, and let me get that good old circumcision. He's gotta have that. Um and boy, that was crazy because it was like I didn't even know that would be a conversation I would have to have. Um And I'm so glad that like me and Josh, we were in solidarity about that. He was like, yeah, they were like, oh, you sure? It's cosmetic or whatever. And we both told them like, hey, it's religious reasons for us. It's not cosmetic. Um, and they were like, oh no, it's cosmetic. Like people will literally try to tell you what to do with your kids. Like, oh my God. Like these days, it's like there are no boundaries when it comes to kids at all. I mean, I was warming myself up to get ready for my family. I got to do something about this mic. This mic is not my style at all. Um, I figured, my grandma was gonna have her 2 cents. Some of my aunties who usually do have their 2 cents. Some of my uncles, my brothers, yeah, they were gonna have a lot to say. A lot of them got kids older than mine, so I was like, yeah, that's pretty much how that's gonna go. And I was preparing myself for it, right? So, but the government, I was like, oh, that's wild. And then they assumed, there's so many things that they assumed in that delivery room. It's, we had to tell them, yes, we are legally married. There has been people who have lied about being married and didn't have to jump through so many hoops. Um, but again, I guess they go by statistics. So, and I will say, like the majority of Black women who have children there, and they even told me, like, oh, it's just the average. And it's like, yeah, but I don't shouldn't have to repeat myself so many times. Even on my paperwork, it was like they still documented me as single. I was like, huh? But yeah, there's so much that goes into it. Um, I don't know. I feel like the commercial part, I guess because they're there to sell you a product. Um, they're gonna say, yeah, black love. They're gonna say, oh, marriage, romance, family, the American dream. These are buzzwords. But in reality, we're all people and we're living in a technological world. And I really feel like one day everything is gonna be like automated. Everything is gonna be connected to an algorithm. And we're already getting to a point where, it's against the law to say what a woman is. That causes a stir a lot of controversy. Um, so yeah, we're just getting to that point, and I don't see it getting any better or any different. But I'm just figuring it out, just like the next one. But yeah, I just thought I'd pop up on here, just kind of share some of my thoughts based off of things that I've been talking about the last two lives, and this self awareness journey that I'm on is it's a lot of work. And I'm also getting used to like this algorithm. Like I'm getting used to, how it shares. Like, how sometimes I have a couple hundred people in here, sometimes I have like one or two. You know, I'm trying to get the hang of this technology and this new age. I'm pretty sure if I keep working at it, I'll get it. But, this was a good live. I appreciate everybody who tuned in. I appreciate everybody in the chat. And I'll catch y'all on the next live. Hopefully, I'll be able to get on sooner. But, I work around the two kids. So they went to bed early tonight. So I was able to pop in. But y'all have a good night. And I'll see y'all on the next one. Peace.